Hello and welcome back to my tutorial series Unreal Engine for VFX Artists. In this video, we will be covering more on Unreal Engine basics, how you can create basic shapes, what are the different modes in the Unreal Engine, and what are different features that will help you enhance your VFX or CGI scene creation rather than using traditional scenes. So let's begin quickly by how we can place or make basic shapes or create basic actors. So as you can see on the top left, you can click on this icon that will give you a drop-down menu, and over there it gives you several options over here to place different kinds of actors. For example, there's a section called shapes, which will allow you to place different, that already gives you different geometric shapes that you can place in the scene. For example, let's say if I click on spear, it creates a spear for you. And it's not just limited to shapes. You can see there are several different items which we will be covering as we move ahead with this tutorial series. Now, this is not the only way to place actors. There's another easier way which I personally prefer to create these. So on the top left, you can click on window, and if you come down, this option called place actors, and this will create a window on the left side for you. Now in this, why I prefer this? Because you can simply search which object you want to create instead of trying to find them in the drop-down menu. So I can simply just type in cube, I found it there, I clicked on it. Sorry, I have to drag and drop it over there, and there it is. So now we have placed a few of our basic actors, but how do we move about? How am I doing this? So once you have any of the objects selected, it will give you a vector. That is on the top side, you can see it is to select and translate objects. So I can move it left, right, or up, down. But what if you want to scale it? So there are two options. The first one is an easy shortcut that you simply press you simply press R, and that will allow you to give you the scaling gizmo, and using that now you can easily scale it up and down. Similarly, you can press E, and that will give you the rotation option, which will allow you to rotate your assets. So this is not just for the actors that you place from the Unreal Engine. You can bring in your own assets or 3D models, and you can simply move it around within the scene. And if you don't want any of these options, you can simply press Q or select any of these from the top menu. But okay, now that we have covered it, there are times that you would require further. Now that we have covered the basic of moving your objects, rotating and scaling, I will give you a quick tutorial on advanced settings for these. So there are times when we don't want the. So there are times when we want to change the space of these gizmos or vectors that you use to move around. So right over here, you see this allows you to cycle between the world and local space. Local is also known as the object space. So if I click on it, now it changed to the object space, which is according to the angle of the object. But if I change it back to global, it is based on the entire global settings of the level or scene that you are using. Furthermore, there are a few more settings that is Furthermore, there are a few more settings on the right side. So as you already remember, I showed you how you can play with the camera speed. There are different settings that will allow you to play with the snapping or the movement amount of these gizmo values. For example, the first one is for moving your objects up and down. For example, the first one is for the translate. So as you can see, the default is at 10. But what if I want to make very minute changes or move it with a very little amount? So if I bring it to 1, now you can see I'm able to move it Now you can see I'm able to move it with very slight changes compared to when the value was at 10. So for you to see the difference again, if I put it at 500, you can see it is forcing me to snap at a very large distance. And this is the same thing for all the other values. For example, for rotation, if I put it at 120, I won't be able to rotate it with a very slight angle, but I'm forced to rotate at every 120 angles. But if I bring it down to, let's say, 2.8, I'm able to rotate at a very small angles. And lastly, it's the same for the scaling as well. So as you can see, the default is at 2.5. Sorry, the default is at 0.25. If I bring it down to 0.03, I can scale it at a very minute detail, but if I bring it to 10, it will snap at tens. So these tools are very useful when you are bringing in assets from outside, as well as if you're creating using these basic shapes. So when you're doing any kind of environment design, you will have to play with these different world spaces, different snapping values for you to get the exact result that you're looking for. Okay, now that I've covered all the basics about how you can place different actors or how you can create basic shapes and different controls about gizmos that will prepare you to bring in your assets that you have already created into the scene for your environment creation, I will quickly move on to different modes that Unreal Engine offers us. So at the top left, you can see there's something called select mode. If you click on it, it gives you several options that you can switch to according to what you're trying to do. So the default one is always select. So select mode is where it gives you the option to select the objects within your scene or within your outliner. And you are able to select it, position according to your will, as well as edit it. So you have to be always in this mode. So if there comes a time you're trying to select something and it doesn't allow you to move it around, it might be because you're not in the correct mode. So the next option is the landscape. So right before I go into the landscape one, I will quickly give you a description of what are levels. So whatever the scenes that you're working in is basically called a level. So as you can see, my level or my scene is called untitled. Since this is a game engine, we call the scenes levels as well. But you can see this is called untitled. So I'll quickly bring this up. Oops. And within my content, I have my level over here. It's called untitled. So what I can do is right click, create a new folder, and I will call it levels. I will go inside there and create a new level. I'll create a basic one, empty one without these mountains and lights already created for me. I will click on create. I will click save selected. And there we go. It opens a level, blank basic level for me. And right there, I will click on file, save current level as, go into levels, give the name basic map or whatever, like I can call it VFX tutorial 02 and click on save. And there we go, our level is created and saved there. So now you know what levels are. These are different scenes. So if you're creating different levels and scenes, you can always create multiple levels, work on one scene, render them out, then move to your next scene. Not everything needs to be at one particular project. Sorry, not everything needs to be in one particular level. And you don't need to create several projects for every scene. Everything can be done at one place. So that's another great benefit of using Unreal Engine compared to the traditional softwares, as you might need to create different levels or different layers or maybe different project files in order to do so. So enough about levels, let's move on to what is landscape. So it's exactly in the name that it allows you to create landscapes or a landscape file within your scene. So as soon as you click landscape, you can see on the right side, it gives you a landscape menu. Depending on your layout, it might also give you the option on the left side, but you do get the landscape menu. And it automatically generates a preview of how large your landscape might look like and how the number of sections it's divided into. So as you know, in traditional softwares, the number of section matters as it defines the number of polygons you're going to have. So of course, more the polygons, heavier the scene will be. So on the right side, you can see the option to select a material. So if you already have a material in mind, you can of course click on drop down and choose one of the materials that's already in your scene. For now, I'll leave it at default. Below gives you the location, rotation, and scale values. So let's say I just want a size 50, and you can see the landscape became small. You can define the section size, so it will give you finer details for higher number of divisions, less details for lower number ones. I'll just select 127 for this, and I'm going to leave the rest on default for now. Fill wall is usually used to fill the entire scene, but that will of course require you to have a strong computer as it will be creating huge amount of polygons for it to work. So I'm just going to click on create. Once you click that, give it a few minutes as it will be generating the landscape file for you. Nice. So once it's done, you can see your mouse cursor is very much different. So I will quickly go back to Outliner before we go in depth. So on the right side, you can see next to every item, it gives you a type, what type of object that is. So with directional light, it says directional light. Of course, you can, I'll just go back to select, rename it whatever, like main source. But what is main source? You can either get the idea from the icon on the left side or just look under the type, what type it is. Just like that with the floor that is right here that was already created for us is a static mesh actor. Static mesh actor is usually just a default actor in your scene that has no other value, but it's just a simple actor in the scene. I will hide this for now and go back to the landscape mode. So in Outliner, you can see with the landscape, it gives you the type landscape. So which means tools you see over here under sculpt, like sculpting, smoothing, and so much, will only work on a file type that is defined as landscape. And the only way you can get a landscape type within Unreal Engine is by creating the landscape through the landscape mode. There's no other way. You can't just simply import it like that. And once it's in, you can use it to sculpt different items or sculpt a mountain, and it is done simply by selecting sculpt and pressing your mouse and allowing it to sculpt. With the sculpt, you have several options and tools such as different brush types. As you can see, it's also giving me a whole different texture. You can of course use a texture map if you like. It doesn't always have to be what is already provided to you. Um, but you can see now it's giving me a whole checkerboard effect on the map, just simply based on what kind of brush I'm using. You have something called true strength. So in simple words, this is the strength of your brush tool. So if I, let's say, make it 1, so I'm able to sculpt very quickly and the results are very intense. I will quickly undo it and put it at 0.1. It takes ages for me to see any result. I'm going to put it at 0.5 now. The tools below are very simple to explain. It's in the name itself again. Is the brush size, the size you want it to affect. So it is always handy if you're like trying to paint minute details or trying to sculpt something around the, let's say, buildings that you have made. So you can always put it at a very low size and zoom into your scene and try to sculpt around it. Brush fall off is basically the feathering effect that you might see in different tools such as Photoshop, where you're trying to paint something and want a little feather effect on the edges. So this is the basic things that's covered within the sculpt. One more thing that I would definitely like you to tell you is how you can reverse sculpt it as well. So while you were sculpting it by pressing left mouse button, if you press down shift and then sculpt or do anything, it will do it in the opposite direction. So this is very useful for if you want to dig something in your scene, or if you want to place water in your scene. So you can just simply sculpt a pool or lake or anything that requires digging or pressing down shift. And then while your shift is pressed down, press your left mouse button to sculpt. Similarly, there are other tools that are smooth. So I'll come to this very rough section of the mountain. And as you can see, if I paint over them, it just smoothens everything out. And once again, you can play with the tool strength, the radius, size, and follow, and gives you different brush type options. And all the other tools does something similar, like flattening, just makes it flat. Erosion will give you, let me come to very close, as you can see the erosion effects. So pretty much that is the landscape tool for you. Lastly, we do have something called paint. So paint is basically painting different tool for you. Let's move on to a different mode, that is foliage. So foliage is basically painting any kind of, let's say, trees, grass, or maybe even scattering rocks or pebbles within your scene. So placing them manually can be very, very tiring. Uh, this is not what you want, but an Unreal Engine makes stuff easy for you by giving you a tool called foliage. So what you can do is simply go to your foliage mode, browse foliage that you have already imported. So let's have this default assets over here. So if I go under, oops, oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong folder. So let's say if I go under the grass, and you can see this grass option, I'll quickly drag and drop it here, and I have the grass over here. So in order to paint, make sure when you hover over them, there's a tick next to it, which means this is active. And, and when you select that, it gives you further options down there. It is, yeah, definitely helpful if you have a bigger screen, but over here we just have to adjust. And below it, you can see it gives you options like painting density, scaling, and different options, which I will go through right now. So as you can see, I've already placed these grass, and when I paint now, zoom in, it has started to paint the grasses for me. Yes, the grasses look very static because it sometimes takes ages to compile it. So I'll quickly show you with a tree instead. So the materials might take ages to compile. So okay, so as you can see now, I'm able to paint it, and I didn't have to manually place so many trees in the scene. Uh, yeah, this is a big problem. Why are the trees so close next to each other, and how you can scatter them around? So I will quickly show you that. So as I have my tree selected and I go down under the tree settings, I can reduce the paint density from 100 to, let's say, 10. Now if I paint it, you can see it is scattered. If you want it further not be scattered, you can also play with the brush paint intensity itself. So it does at 0.5, I'll bring it down to 0.1. So now you can see it's placing very few trees, and this looks way more natural for jungle or woods in a VFX scene. It doesn't stop over there. Within your tree settings, you can go down and play with the scale. For, let's say, I want the smallest tree to be 0.2, but the largest tree can be 5, let's say. And if I scroll out now and start painting, you can see the trees are at random sizes now, anywhere between 0.5 to, 0.2 to 5. So you don't have to have such a huge scale. You can even have small scales like 2.1 to 2.2, and even 1 to 10, so there's no limit over there. And similarly, you can do these for like rotation and as well as their Z offset, that's placement among itself. So it can be totally randomized very easily. One last thing under the foliage, a few more things under the foliage. You can always, let's say, try to erase these. So I've placed these trees, but I don't want that huge chunk of trees over there. So I will simply go towards them. On the right side, I will change my mode to erase and make sure my tree is still active. And now when I move my brush around, it erases the portion that I want to get rid of. Also, there are tools such as lasso if you want to select a bunch of trees and move them, and you don't have to like delete them and replace them. But since I already want to delete them, I'll just move them and delete it. So those are the basics of the foliage tool. It doesn't limit to grasses and trees or rocks, by the way. You can literally have anything scattered within your scene. And the good thing is it doesn't always have to be a landscape file. So let's say if I go to shapes, cube, I've placed a cube now. Where did it go? And if I try to paint, increase the size of this cube. So let's say I go back to my foliage mode, try to paint on top of that. Huh, that's interesting. Oh, sorry, I was in the lasso mode. Now you can see I'm able to paint right on top of it. My bad. So yeah, it doesn't have to be a landscape. You can actually paint it over anything. And as I was saying, it doesn't need to be rocks or trees. So let's say I've imported a random character in my contents folder for now. Let's say I want to scatter his main body. So as you can see, the file has accepted it as a foliage type. That is selected. And if I zoom in now, you can see several of his body parts are scattered around. So yeah, it doesn't have to be always grass trees. It can actually take anything that you need to be scattered. It is just generally used for trees, grass, and other natural elements that are huge amount. Cool, I will quickly erase so many objects on the scene. Cool. With that done, I will just close the foliage mode and go back to select. Now, next up is the modeling mode. So what is the modeling mode? Within the modeling mode, let's say you have already imported and created some 3D models, but you want to make further edits on it. You don't always have to go back to the original software you worked in. You can actually make those changes all over here. So a quick example, let's say I created a box from the modeling tool. Yeah, let's say I completed. With that, now I can actually edit the polygons and different vertices of the object that is either created or that I have imported. So let's say, let's say I want to edit the polygons or the vertices over here. So I'm able to select it, stretch it, and move it around without the need of going into a 3D modeling software. And this is the same. It doesn't always have to be the basic shapes I've created. Anything that you have imported within the scene allows that. So there are several different tools, such as I'll show you one more. So if I let's say place a box, make a sphere. I complete it. Bring the sphere, place it over there. I can select both of them and click on Mesh Boolean, and you can see this, it has removed this cube area within the sphere. And on the right side, you do get different options such as difference b minus a. So it boolean the sphere for us. You can do the intersection bits only, as well as the union. So yeah, the Unreal Engine modeling tool does definitely help us do several of the modeling tools all within Unreal Engine without needing to go back to softwares like Maya, 3ds Max, or even Blender. I will cover one last thing that is very essential, that is the UV mapping. So let's say I will quickly go to my content browser and bring in a random material. I will definitely go in depth about what are materials and how you can create it yourself later in the series. So that's it for this video, where I've covered different types of modeling modes, landscape, foliage, modeling. Uh, but this is not the end. Even within modeling, there are more tools such as the auto UVing, which I will go in more details when I'm covering the material section in this video tutorial series. But this is for this video, and I will be moving on to what are lightings, how you can create lightings in the next video, and stay tuned. Thank you.